Welcome to the Old Man of the Three with JJ Reddick and Tommy Alter, brought to you by 342 Productions. This is episode 145. Mike Breen, Tommy, we were blessed a couple weeks ago to sit in this room with Mike, just an absolute legend in broadcasting. He's a Hall of Famer. He's won numerous awards. He's the most iconic voice in the NBA.
Yes, and he's been, and we get into this, but he's been doing this since the 90s in New York. He's seen it all. He's been a part of so many great games, great moments. It's crazy. Like, we didn't have time to go through everything.
Yes, but we did go through a lot. I will say. So we get into his backstory. We get into the origin of his signature bang call. We also talk about some specific moments that he's called. The Malice in the Palace, Game 7 of the 2016 NBA Finals. He has so many great stories. This was one of my favorite episodes that we have ever done. We are recording this on Tuesday, just 48 hours basically before the trade deadline. Already fireworks over the weekend. We touched on the Kyrie Irving trade to the Dallas Mavericks on our weekly episode, The Old Man of the Three Things, which is available exclusively on Amazon Music. I don't want to go into that trade necessarily too much, but Tommy, it feels like a lot could happen over the next 48 hours.
When do you think it's going to get going?
I'm hearing there's a specific trade that's close, and it's been reported on Twitter, so I'm not breaking news here, but by the time we release this episode, it could be done, and that's the Russ to the Jazz for Conley. I've heard that is getting close to being done. The Lakers are interesting, and when you look at the Western Conference and all those teams bunched together, Dallas being one of them, making the big trade for Kyrie Irving, I look at Memphis potentially. They have done such a good job of drafting, and they have picks to get rid of. I think New Orleans could be active. They still have a bunch of assets.
So many assets. It's crazy.
Bunch of young players. I mean, basically a month ago before Zion got hurt, they were 23-13 and in second or third place in the Western Conference. They're at 9th right now. The other teams, I mentioned this on the Old Man of the Three Things on Monday. I think Phoenix could be potentially very active. I know they were linked to Kyrie Irving. I think the Clippers are desperately looking for a point guard.
Yeah,
exactly. Of course, the Lakers. Another interesting team in the Western Conference, Tommy, is the Portland Trailblazers, who traded for Jeremy Grant in the summer. They got off to a great start. They've been hovering around the 10 spot for the last 4 to 5 weeks. Well, Dame is playing at an all-time level. He's shown that he is being loyal to that franchise. Do they swing something? Do they go big?
Well, they haven't. In Sharp, they have an asset that they can go big game hunting and finally get sort of, I think was a great pickup for them. But if they can get another big piece like that, that's a team that could rocket up the West quickly. The other one we talked about Monday on the sort of the flip side of things is Toronto.
Yes. Well, this is what I was going to say. If in terms of buyers and sellers, I just, down at the bottom of the Western Conference, you've got the Spurs and the Rockets. The Spurs with Josh Richardson, Jakob Poeltl, and Doug McDermott. Those guys, vets, could help a playoff team. Those guys could potentially be on the move. Houston Rockets, seems like for the last 2 years, we've talked about Eric Gordon a ton.
Just get him out of there,
He could be on the move. So those are potential sellers in the West, in my opinion. And then we go to the East, and there's a bunch of teams, again, in that sort of no man's land. The Atlanta Hawks, the Chicago Bulls, the Raptors, the Wizards, those teams, they're basically fighting for play-in spots. Do they make a move? The Hawks, to me, given what we know about their ownership situation and who's running that front office now, they're probably looking to be a buyer. John Collins, his name has been mentioned a ton of times for the last 2 years in trade rumors. So that's a team that could potentially move. But the Raptors, that team is, to me, the team to watch because they have 3 players that potentially could be on the move that would definitely swing a playoff series, potentially title odds. Yeah. That's the team to watch.
All NBA guys don't get moved that often.
Exactly.
Can I throw one more Eastern Conference team we've talked about offline that I feel like is really interesting to watch, which is...
Can I guess?
Yes.
The Miami Heat.
That is correct. That is correct. Because I think, I know, with Jimmy and Bam, they are another team that could go big game hunting. They have the assets to do it, especially if they decide to trade somebody like Tyler. And I think that is, I think anytime you have Jimmy and Bam, you are going to be competitive in a playoff series. And if there's a scoring guard that's out there that they can go get, that's a team that I think they've been shaky sort of all year, and they've been injured, and there's been a lot of issues for it. But we talked about it last week. They've started to play well. They're up to, are they 6th now in the East, 5th or 6th in the East?
Yeah, but firmly 6th, it looks like.
Yeah, and you could see them getting back to, a real sort of like Eastern Conference threat with the right move.
Right, they're a one possession away from making the NBA Finals for the second time in 3 years. Pat Riley is a winner, and he's shown that he's willing to take risks and make big swings. So I agree with you. That's definitely a team in the East. I should mention, it keeps coming up. Jay Crowder has been linked to the Bucks. They probably will be looking for more wing depth, especially defensively. Cavs are a team that we've mentioned a bunch. There's players on the Hornets and Pistons. Those teams aren't going anywhere this year. Do they fully, just Pistons basically already are, but they fully just tank and go for Wembanyama. And they have players that are absolutely playoff rotation caliber players. I want to bring up on DraftKings Sportsbook the odds and the shifting odds after this Kyrie Irving to Dallas trade. It's interesting with Dallas specifically because when the odds opened for NBA championship last spring, I think it was in May or early June, they opened at plus 1,400. They've shifted around. Right before the trade on February 4th, they were at plus 3,000. They moved as low as plus 1,200. They're now at plus 1,400. So their odds essentially have not shifted since they were in the conference finals last year, which is hilarious.
It's crazy.
The Nets seem like they're potentially not done. It's been reported that they're not done. They still have not done the trade call as of this recording. Their odds open at plus 450. There was a bunch of noise all summer because of the Kevin Durant's trade request. They went as high as plus 3,000 to be NBA champions in July. On the ultimatum day, they were down all the way to plus 700. Right now, they're at plus 2,000. Feels like good odds. Kevin Durant, they have a team that's built around him, and your boy is on fire.
Cam, he is beyond on fire. I will say this sort of goes without saying, but both these teams is like if you have Kevin Durant or Luka on your team, you're always going to be in the conversation. Yeah, you know what you're going to get with those two, and so even with the Mavs and everything, we don't know what we're going to get with Kyrie or anything like that. But it's Luka. Look who Luka got to the Western Conference Finals last year. You know what I mean?
There's a point of discussion in our conversation upcoming with Mike Breen, where we talk about the outsized input that star players have in the NBA. There's a Daryl Morey anecdote from an appearance that he had on a podcast recently that we talk about, and you're absolutely right. Kevin Durant, Luka, Tatum, Jokic, Embiid, LeBron, Steph, I'm Giannis, of course. Like the input is so much greater when it's a top 5 caliber player that you always have a chance in a playoff series. Going to a playoff series, right? Dallas Mavericks. They're likely going to have the best or one of the 2 best players every single time on the court in a playoff series. When I throw down on the NBA action, it's got to be with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. For a limited time, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every day. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app today. New customers can download the app using code JJ, opt in, and place a same-game parlay on any NBA game. If it doesn't hit, you'll get a bonus bet back. I'm going to repeat that. If it doesn't hit, you'll get a bonus bet back. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code JJ. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. See show notes for details. One final reminder, we have a live show Thursday in New Orleans at the Civic Theater at 8 p.m. with 2 special guests, Jose Alvarado and CJ McCollum. It's going to be an awesome show. There are a few tickets left. If you are in the New Orleans area, come have a fun time with us Thursday night at the Civic Theater, 8 p.m. Without further ado, let's get to our conversation with NBA broadcasting legend Mike Breen. All right, let's welcome in Hall of Famer Mike Breen. Mike, I mean this sincerely. This is a real treat and an honor for us to have you on the show. Thanks for doing this.
Oh, it's an honor to be here. I hope I'm going to get a little old man in the 3 swag. We have
some gear outside for you.
That's the main reason. Although he's not telling the truth, because we just did a game together, and he comes up to me, and the first thing he says, "I'm sorry, what was your first name again?" So I don't really believe him.
He's bad with names. It's fine.
That's not true. Actually, Mike used to come up to me before games. I think this probably started when I was with the Clippers, but we'd be at MSG and we'd go say hi to each other before the game. And you would drop some hints. You'd be like, hey, you should come work for us. You should come work with us. We should call games when you're done playing. You were the one, I think, that planted the seed.
Well, it was even before that when we'd have talk and I'd ask you about the team you're on, give me some thoughts. And the way he described it, it was just, okay, that's a great perspective. And all the stuff that you tell me, I could use and relate to. So back then I'm thinking, boy, but you never know. There's always guys who are great interviews when they play and they give you great insight. And then you put them on the air and it's like, whoa, there's just there's no shot.
When you were playing, were you aware of the sort of specifics of who was broadcasting what game? Because we've talked about how you didn't necessarily care about a lot of the sort of media around the team in various cities, but did you care about sort of the TV side of things?
As someone who watched basketball every night, I certainly knew who was doing the broadcast. I say this all the time. I had no idea what First Take was. I did not know what the format. I knew who Stephen A was because I would see him at games, especially when I played in Philly, but I was not familiar with how that show was set up. On the broadcast side, it's interesting because I think as a player, you listen for what the color analyst is saying. You guys, the play-by-play guys, are just so good. You're so polished. And so there were certain guys that I would mute. If you can look up my Twitter history, you know who those guys are.
I need one specific.
Chris Webber.
Okay.
I couldn't do it, man. Okay. I couldn't do it. And I'm sorting through it now as a color analyst. I have a lot of stuff I need to get better at. I actually want to tell this story. So Mike and I worked together a couple months ago, first time working together, and we have our production meeting in the morning. We always have a production meeting. It's usually over Zoom. Sometimes it's in person, but we're on a Zoom call. And in every single production meeting that I've ever done, which I've only done 15, but every single one, the producer will bring up the big picture stuff. If the game gets out of hand, here's some thoughts. Maybe it's LeBron chasing, like last night, LeBron chasing Kareem's record, getting close. And we get towards the end of the call and I say, hey, on the big picture stuff, what are your guys' thoughts? Here's some general ideas I have. And Mike quickly interjects, yeah, no, I don't want this to turn into a talk show.
Well, you gotta have a fine line between, and sometimes the big picture stuff is great, but at the same time, you still have to respect what's out on the floor in front of you, and especially the viewers who are watching, because at that point, a lot of the only people who are watching still care about their team, and they want to know the 11th guy on the team who's getting a run, what you think about him and talk about him, because they've been tweeting how they want him to play more minutes. So it's a balance. And, especially for me with working with Mark and Jeff, because they are great on big picture stuff. And most people are. It's fun to talk about, but you have to still respect the game that's going on. So I sometimes think we get away from that too much and not stick with the game.
Tim Corrigan, who's an absolute legend, always says that. He always says, make it about the game. Make the game the star. He called me after we did the game together, and he's like, I could tell you were nervous. And I was like, really? I was like, I didn't feel nervous, but maybe I came across that way. He goes, well, yeah, I mean, you called a dunk shot. And I said to him, Tim, that's because a college teammate texted me at halftime and said, can you work dunk shot into the broadcast? I'm like, yeah, easy.
So that's all it has to happen? Somebody texts you and you're going to say it on the air?
This is disconcerting now. We're going to try this.
You know what I want to ask? I wanted to ask you, since you're talking about when you watched as a player, and I've asked players this a bunch, what do they hate what we do on the air? Is there a certain way? Because obviously when you're announcing so many games, you praise, but you also have to criticize. What, as a player, did you hate? Like, what did you think was unfair, whether it's play-by-play or analyst, that drove you crazy?
You know, it's funny because I think we look at everything through our own personal lens. I never rewatched my own broadcast, meaning my own games, like the actual broadcast. I watched film, so that was silent. So I never really, and I would see highlights, or people would send me something posted on Twitter, and I would watch it, but it wasn't part of my thing. Overall, you know this. You've been around the league for 30 years. NBA players are very sensitive. I'm sensitive to a degree.
As are announcers.
Yeah, we all are.
Right.
Hey, Mike, what makes a good announcer? What makes a great announcer?
I tell you what I strive for. Like if I'm doing a game, what I want the viewer to feel is number one, that all right, this guy's prepared. You can tell he's prepared. He knows the teams, he knows the players, he knows the league. That's number one. Number two is that they say, boy, this guy, he loves the league. You can tell he loves basketball, because I think that's as important as anything. Even if you're not so prepared, if you out there and you feel, man, there's nothing better than watching these two teams go at each other. And the third thing is, all right, this guy, he likes the guy he's working with, gets along with. I think if you accomplish those three things, you're doing a good job. That's what I strive for in every game. And it was obviously very difficult the third one when I work with you, but no, it's and that stuff takes it takes a while to get chemistry. Now you and I've known each other for years and had a nice relationship. So to me, it was so easy. And by the way, I did not think you were nervous in that game at all. But that's one of the underrated parts of our business now. I can say "are" to you now, is that the chemistry of being on the air. It takes a while. It's like when you're playing with a guy and you know what his tendencies on the floor. It's the same thing on the air, and it makes a difference when you work with somebody and get a feel for those tendencies.
How do you think you straddle the line between sort of exuberance, but then also not being over the top and being distracting? I was thinking about this in NFL terms a couple of weeks ago when the Jaguars had the crazy comeback in the first round of the playoffs, and the broadcast team got a lot of heat afterwards because they were basically calling it like it was a regular season game, and it was like, this is one of the great moments in this franchise's history. But you could make the argument they're just, they don't want to make themselves the story. They don't want to make it about them, just calling it as it is. So in your personal experience, how did you kind of learn to kind of straddle that line?
I was always taught there's a crescendo to the game. You start off, you're not going to go, if a guy hits a shot, you're not going to go, oh, we're tied at 4. You can't do that. So you save the big moments and the big calls as the game goes up. And so when your voice gets to that high intensity level, and if you're a viewer, oh, wow, that's a big play. Because every play can't be a big play. Every play can't be a great play. So you have to find that balance. And you don't want to scream your fool head off. I feel that the human voice is not built to that high level for a long time. That's why I think the bigger the play, the more concise the calls are. But you've got to do it justice. And it's interesting you bring that up. If you look at the years past, the way games were broadcasted, there wasn't that screaming and yelling. There was great classic calls, but a guy like Pat Summerall, who was one of my idols as a broadcaster, he didn't have the crazy call. He just had a good, strong call at the end. But it's changed, like everything. Like the way the game is played has changed, and the game is broadcast. And I give some of the credit to Gus Johnson. So Gus Johnson gets on the NCAA tournament, and he loses it at the end of games. And you know what? I think a lot of us, I'm speaking for myself, but in talking to others, we're saying, that's okay. He sounded like he was having the greatest time of his life. He punctuated this amazing moment in an NCAA tournament game. And I think he had a real influence not only on future broadcasters, but even current ones who wanted to kind of lose it once in a while. And he made it was okay to lose it. And I credit, and I've known Gus for years. We're great pals. We worked together with the Knicks for many years. And I think he had a great impact that way.
On that note, Bill Simmons last year during the finals, we were texting, and one of the things he said to me about sort of me getting into calling games was that when he was on Countdown, it was like the highlight of his career. And part of the reason was that he was documenting history. He was part of documenting history. And I talk with Ryan Rucco about this all the time. You know, I'm watching YouTube highlights every morning with my kid. It's like montage after montage. And these iconic NBA moments, oftentimes it's your voice. When you re-listen to that, are you someone that can handle their own voice? Because I personally can't.
Well, you first start, you hate your own voice, but you have to listen because you've got to, all right, where can I get better? And you have to have other people listen for you to tell you where you get better, but you have to listen. After a while, you can't do it. I have a hard time now at listening to it. But when I hear those highlights played back, it's kind of surreal actually, but you want to make sure that you do the moment right for the player or for the team. That's my goal, not to have some classic call. You want to do service to that special moment in the NBA because I've always feel, I know this sounds corny, but I feel it's an honor and a privilege to call these games, but I also think it's a responsibility to do those moments right. And, you know, hopefully you get most of them. You're not going to get all of them right. Sometimes you blow them. But that's my goal is to be responsible and serve that moment right for the player and the team.
I have only worked with you once, but I can say that came across to the 100th degree. Just the responsibility, the seriousness with which you take your craft. A number of your colleagues have said that to me as well. You know, in leading up to work, what's Mike like to work with? What
was the worst thing you heard on that question?
They said that you have an outsized ego, which I was like, no, I didn't. They didn't say that. They actually said no ego. One of the things that's been interesting for me on the other side of a playing career is the way you measure a performance, because in basketball, it's very cut and dry. There's a result. You win, you lose. There's a box score. There's advanced stats. There's different ways to measure whether or not you had a good game. BasketballReference.com has a game score for every game that every player has ever played. For you, how do you measure or judge your own performance?
Wow, that's actually a great question. You know, you're gonna have mistakes. I make mistakes every single game I've done. No such thing as a perfect broadcast. You want to make sure that you document what happened and why it happened. And you're not doing that alone. You obviously, your partner, especially in terms of basketball strategy, you got to make sure that they're part of it. I think to make sure that everybody on the broadcast is comfortable, to make sure you document it right and that you don't have any major screw-ups. I mean, this is a terrible answer to your question because I've never been asked that before. It's more of a feeling. Like when I walk away after a game, I'll know, okay, I was just okay. I'll know, you know what, I nailed that one tonight. Or on an occasion, boy, did I screw that up at the end. So it's more of a feeling in terms of you just know. And it's not just your own performance, it's everything. Are you in sync with the producer? Are you in sync with the replays? Did you do that graphic justice that the graphics coordinator was able to come up with? Did you get your partners in? It's all, you know, again, it sounds silly, but it's, you know, playing basketball is a team sport. Broadcasting basketball is a team sport. So you've got to make sure your teammates are happy, you're happy, and when that all comes together. And there's no better feeling when you finish and everybody feels like, wow, we kicked ass on that. We knocked that one out of the park.
Did you have a call in retrospect you wish you would handle differently?
Well, yeah, there was one last year in the playoffs. It was in the first round, and it was game one, and it was Nets and the Celtics, and it was a fantastic game. And it was one of those games, and I think we even said it at some point during the fourth quarter. I said to Tim Corrigan, who was producing, man, it's all clicking. The feeling was great. And then Jayson Tatum hits a shot at the end, and I butchered the call as badly as I've ever butchered a big call at the end of a game. And I couldn't sleep like the next 2 days Now, if that was 10 years ago, it probably would have been a 2-week grief period. But that was, and the reason I was so mad was because I screwed it up because the whole crew had just knocked it out of the park. And by 1 second at the very end, I blew the call.
I want to get into your origin story because I believe you are a superhero in your industry, and every superhero has an origin story.
Do I owe you money?
No, I'm serious, Mike. I'm serious.
Or do you owe me money?
You owe me around. Yeah. You owe me around the golf at Wingfoot.
Okay. Gotcha.
Actually, you gave me one of the greatest looks I've ever gotten last summer when you said, "Hey, we're taking a PJ to Oak Hill in Rochester." But you asked me 2 days before, and I'm like, Mike, I got two young kids. Like, I need at least 4 weeks notice.
It was an understandable rejection. Bothersome, but understandable.
Would have loved to have joined. NBA fans, it's time to bring the hoops action to the palm of your hand with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. This week, new customers can bet $5 and win $200 in free bets instantly.
Plus, for a limited time, all new and existing customers can get a no-sweat same-game parlay every day. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app today, opt in, and place a same-game parlay on any NBA game, and if it doesn't hit, you'll get a free bet back.
Friday night, Minnesota at Memphis. A lot of stuff going on in the Western Conference. One day after the trade deadline, will either of those teams be involved in any big trades? Download the app now and sign up with code JJ. New customers can bet $5 on the NBA and get $200 in free bets instantly. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Reminder to sign up with code JJ. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions apply. Void in Ohio. See show notes for details. Do you know how much your subscriptions cost? Most Americans think they spend around $80 a month on subscriptions when the actual total is closer to $200. If you don't know exactly how much you're spending every month, you need Rocket Money. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills, all in one place.
Over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about, like that streaming service you bought to watch just one show on, or that free trial that you never even used. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for things you don't need. Simply find the subscription you don't want and press cancel, and Rocket Money will cancel it for you. No more long hold times with customer service or tedious emailing back and forth. Rocket Money makes canceling subscriptions as easy as a click of a button. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year.
Not only does it save you money, it doesn't take any time at all. I've found numerous subscriptions over the past 5 months since I started using Rocket Money, and it took me all of 5 minutes. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/JJ. That's rocketmoney.com/JJ, rocketmoney.com/JJ. How did you get into broadcasting? What was your start in it, the early interest, and the sort of inclination, desire to begin a career doing this?
Grew up family. I'm one of 6 boys. My father was a huge sports fan, so sports was not an option. It was a requirement in the family. So played every sport, every day during the summer, wiffle ball, football, everything. Played in high school, was good enough to play in high school, but realized not going any further after that and was trying to decide what to do. So I had a friend who was doing college radio at the time, and he said, why don't you try doing college radio and get into sports? So that's why I went to Fordham and went to Fordham University. And my first year, when you join the college radio station, it's the most intimidating thing going. I was so shy back then to the point where in between classes, I was a commuter. Fordham's in the Bronx, and I lived 12 minutes from Fordham. So in between classes, I would go back and sit in my car because I didn't have any friends yet. Nobody from my high school went to. So instead of sitting in the cafeteria by myself, I thought I looked like too much of a nerd. I would sit in my car between classes. So I go to the station, and I'm so intimidated, so overwhelmed. And back then, the students who ran it, there was no instructor. It was all students, the seniors and juniors. If you weren't an attractive female freshman, they gave you no time. So now you're less on the pecking order, and I just felt lost. And I'm thinking to myself, man, this is not for me. I'm not really making friends. I'm not going to be good at this. I just can't do it. And then one day I walk in, and there's this guy. He's having an argument with a girl at the station. So it's in the hallway of the station, and he's yelling at her, "I can see it in your eyes. I know you want me. I know you want to date me." And he's a little overweight, and she's maybe the most attractive woman on campus, and she's yelling back at him, "If I was on a desert island, I still wouldn't want you. You were the last man on earth." And he's not taking no for an answer. He's going back at her. And I'm laughing at it. It's such a funny scene. And he has a great sense of humor. So when the whole thing ends, I go up and introduce myself to him, thinking, all right, here's a guy I could be friends with a great sense of humor. He introduces me to like 4 of his buddies who were egging him on during the whole battle. And all of a sudden I have 5 new friends, and it changed everything. And that guy was Michael Kay, the Yankees announcer. So I credit him. We've been best friends for over 40 years. And that's because I'm like one meeting away from walking out of that radio station and not doing it. I was going to call my dad and say, all right, send me the Steam Fitters Union application. I'll become a steam fitter, which is what he was.
So you were naturally introverted?
Yes. Well, I wouldn't say introverted. I just was intimidated by that scene.
Yeah.
So you walk into there, and all these sophomores, juniors, and seniors who, they're on the air all the time, and they're confident.
They got swag.
And I was just really overwhelmed by it.
The car scene, by the way, Tommy, the car scene, that almost brings tears to my eyes.
Yeah, there's zero sympathy from you guys, and the trauma that I went through as a freshman at Fordham.
I wasn't sure where that story was going with the girl, by the way. If it was like
I didn't know. I thought for a second he was going to be like, then I went and introduced myself to that girl. She's now my wife.
Yeah.
No, that did not happen.
When did you, I was going to ask you actually just about the confidence thing. When did you feel like you became confident behind the mic? Like when did you walk into an arena, walk into a stadium and be like, okay, this is what I'm maybe not, excellent at or perfect at, but I'm really good at this?
When I started my first job out of college, I worked for a radio station in Poughkeepsie, New York, and it was all news, and it was covering things. I was more a news reporter and then an anchor. And when I gave the audition tape to the news director to get the job, he hired me, and the only reason he hired me because the pay was, he knew I was going to pay me. And I remember listening to my audition tape a year after I did the job, and I was on 6 days a week. And the audition tape, like, how did this guy hire me? I was so bad. But after a year of being on the air, I improved so much. I thought, okay, I've got a chance to be good at this. That's the first time I thought, oh yeah, maybe I have a future here because I got a lot better. And that's, for me, it was always just reputation. Like my first games I did were a high school game of the week. I was for PJ Carlissimo's Seton Hall team, I was the analyst on their radio casts. I did Marist basketball when I was up in Poughkeepsie. So just the reputation of doing it over and over again, each year you just felt a little better, a little more confident, but you never feel like you've got it down, and you never feel like, okay, you can ease up now. You got it all figured out. No, it's like every year you have to prepare for I prepare for every single game like I've always done, because if I don't prepare going into it, I don't feel comfortable. And it's kind of a sickness, but you always feel like you have to prove yourself that you're still good enough to do this.
Yeah, I relate to that completely. I think the entire gist of being a professional athlete is being prepared. And that's why I talk about my routine all the time. Like, that's why my routine was so sacred to me, because without doing the routine, without doing the preparatory work to get ready to play, I didn't feel comfortable. Right. Whether that was a bad night of sleep, or maybe I didn't get my nap, or maybe, shoot around ran late. I didn't get my post shoot around work on my own. Like, there were things that would throw me off. Room service doesn't come on time. My worst shooting game of my career, Milwaukee at Indiana, my 2 months with the Bucks. We're staying at a different hotel than the Conrad. It was like this new hotel, swanky. And I would always call before my nap. I need my room service at 4:30, buses at 5. I'm going to eat, get on the bus. 4:55, no room service. I go downstairs. Oh, we don't have your food. Like, totally threw me off. Worst shooting night of my life, 1 for 11.
Wow.
And it was because they they drop the ball on the room service.
Right. That's you have your routine, and if it goes off that, it's a problem.
Yeah.
I watched that with you every time I got to the arena. Your pregame routine was like unbelievably how focused it was and how detailed it was. But that's what made you the player you were.
It used to drive me crazy when people would try to talk to me during the pregame.
I had a couple of times you blew me off. I'm not very happy to even try to be introduced. So I learned after a while, like, don't go near him until he's done. And then when you were done, you were okay to talk.
Dear friend of mine works for the Spurs. We work together in Orlando. I'm going to call him out right now. Adam Glessner. He listens to every episode of the podcast. He's listened to every episode since day one, back in the Yahoo days. He was the one guy that would always interrupt, especially when I was playing in Philly. This is the end of my career. This is when I'm like super OCD, super psycho. And he would he lived in Philly. He was a scout for the Spurs at the time. And so he would just come through and I'm doing my 2-ball dribbling. I'm in my routine, tap me on the shoulder.
Look, did you see the look on his? He still had that intensity when he was
This is how you know it's
wow.
This is how you know it's a good friend, because this guy would have been dead otherwise.
He's a dear friend. We don't always use Wikipedia with our guests, but sometimes you find out interesting tidbits on the Wikipedia page. The origin of the bang apparently came from you randomly yelling it at Fordham basketball games in the stands. Did you ever get any weird looks for that?
No, but do you ever, when you go to a college game and you see somebody either dressed with all the war paint on or screaming stuff? No, it's when you're a college kid, nothing matters more than if your college team wins. So there was a group of about 8 of us that we went to every single road game. Now, Fordham back then didn't do a lot of traveling. They'd go down to LaSalle, Philadelphia, St. Peter's, Jersey City, and we'd go to all the games. And when a Fordham player hit a big shot, I would yell bang. And that was before the 3-point line. There was no 3-point line back then. And then when I started doing the broadcasts on the college radio station, I tried it and I didn't think it worked. I didn't like it because I didn't say the basket was good. And I thought, no, they don't know that. The listeners don't know that. So I shelved it. But then when I started doing like these high school games of the week for a local cable channel, I tried it again. And there was a game, I think it was in Atlanta. We used to do these Friday night games, and there's no better atmosphere than a Friday night high school game in a town where the team is good, and the place was packed, maybe 3,000, but the loudest gym I'd ever been in my life, and it's going crazy, and there was a big shot at the end, and I tried it because my voice was not capable of overriding the crowd, and it kind of clicked like, oh, that was a perfect way to just one syllable, concise word on a big shot and let the crowd take over the rest, because you use the crowd for part of your broadcast, as they call laying out. And I liked it then, so that's when I started using it more and more. And when I first started doing it on Knick games as a Knick radio voice, I remember there was a columnist killed me for it, called it lame. And I'm thinking, I don't agree with that. Can I ask a couple of people, do you think? And they said, no, it's good. So I kept it.
Yeah, I tried to make dunk shot my shtick, and it just didn't work.
Well, we both kind of crushed you on that.
Did the columnist ever not apologize, but did he ever revise his?
No.
What a terrible take.
Yeah, well,
it's the only reason he's in the Hall of Fame.
But I've tried dunk shot a few times after, and it's not sticking.
It doesn't resonate.
Right.
It doesn't resonate.
Right.
Do you remember your first bang in an NBA game?
It had to be a Knick game on the radio. I can't give you the first one.
You told, I think it was during the finals last year, if I'm not mistaken, you went on our friend Pablo's podcast, ESPN Daily, and you called the Ray Allen shot against the Spurs the most significant bang of your career. What was it about that particular moment that was so meaningful?
Because it decided a championship. That shot doesn't go down. San Antonio wins. That goes in. Now they've got a chance, obviously to win a title that they're desperate to win. Also, it had something to do with him as well, and you could relate to this as well as anybody. Every single time I went to an arena to cover his games, whether it was Seattle, Milwaukee, Boston, Miami, I like to get there early. He was always there ahead of time, and he was always out on the court. And those were the shots he was taking. So if anybody was comfortable in taking that big shot, it was him. And to see and know all the hard work he put into it for that moment, it meant something to me as a fan that this son of a gun, all that stuff, now it comes to fruition with this one great shot. And because it meant so much in what was a great game between two great teams with some of the great players that the league has ever seen, I think that's probably why. It's hard to pick one, but that's got to be the one.
I think about that play a lot. And one of the things I think about on that play is Manu Ginobili going for the rebound. He ultimately falls down because in some ways that's Manu, right? Manu is a competitor. He makes winning plays.
One of my all-time favorite players.
One of my all-time favorite players as well. And that mindset is what caused him to go for the rebound. But maybe the safe play on that is to just hang with Ray in the corner. Let them get the offensive rebound
right.
and not leave Ray. I talk about this on broadcasts all the time. The best opportunity to get an open three is on an offensive rebound. Watching the game last night, Kevon Looney on like back-to-back plays gets an offensive rebound, doesn't even look at the rim.
Right.
And he's just scanning for Steph or Clay. And so I don't know. It's like there's so much, I agree with you, because there's so much riding on that shot. LeBron's legacy, the big three.
How it changes career paths in terms of how we look upon them. One shot. And that's the amazing thing about, I like to say our game, because I feel like in part because we all love it so much, is how the fine line between winning and losing, between winning championships and not, between getting in a playoff, it often comes down to one play, one made shot, one missed shot. And it's incredible how often that happens. And that was one of them.
Did you have a favorite LeBron finals moment?
Well, the block against Golden State when they won the title, that has to be it. You know, it meant so much to him to win one there. And that's what I thought was so cool. You know, so he wins a couple in Miami, and now he goes there. And this one almost meant more to him. Because that first one, the joy on his face when they won in Miami, but for him to do it in Cleveland and do it with a block, you know, it showed what it meant to him. The hunger that he went after that title was pretty amazing, especially the way that series went down 3-1. It's over. Golden State's winning again. And then to come back and do it on the road with that play.
Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. You called the Malice in the Palace.
Yes.
I was doing a game last year in the playoffs in Atlanta, and there was a bomb threat. There was a backpack with a fake bomb left outside by I think it was by Dominique Wilkins' statue outside the arena. And this is like my fourth game I've done. And Dave Pash and Monica McNutt basically handled it. But being live on air in a moment like that, and Malice in the Palace, of course, is 10 times, 100 times that. What's going through your mind? How are you handling that when you're prepared and trained to call a basketball game?
Well, first off, I had experience because that was during kind of the Knick era where they were in fights all the time. So that may have been like my 10th fight of my career that I call. I'm doing blow by blow, not play by play. And what I learned, because the first time you do anything in the business and the first time I called a fight, if I look back and watched it, I'd be embarrassed because you hyperventilate because you're not used to it. But once you call a few, you realize the only thing to do is do it like it's play by play. You're calling, all right, this is happening here. So you're just documenting it. And you wait till it's over before you start to editorialize and get the emotion in. Although on something like that, to not get emotional with it going on was that was impossible. So that was part of it. But that's what I try to focus on is just, all right, I'm calling a basketball game that just happens to be, instead of shots being taken, it's punches being thrown. So that's the approach to that, and try and stay calm. I know I wasn't calm during it, but that was like nothing I've ever seen. Because what made it so scary was the crowd kept surging down. And you just, one fight was broken up, another two started. It seemed like it went on for a half an hour when it maybe lasted 5 minutes. And I remember one sequence when the Pacers, they were getting them off the court. And in the Palace, it was a narrow little place to go to the locker room. So the fans were hanging over, and with anything they could get, including full bottles of water and cans, they're pelting the players with it. And as I'm watching, there was this woman who was really nicely dressed, and she seemed so out of place. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this poor woman, she's in the midst of this chaos. And all of a sudden, she gets this look on her face, and she takes out a bottle and throws it down. And what I'm thinking is, this woman in her entire life, she would never do anything like that, but she got caught up in the mob mentality. And that's what was scary about that night, is that the crowd almost became against what was going on and wanted to defend their honor. It was, that was time where it was like, there was a couple of minutes there, like, this could be one of the worst things I've ever seen. It was on a basketball court, but it could have been even worse than that.
Subsequently, there was the Nuggets-Knicks brawl, which compared to the Malice in the Palace was not that bad. A lot of people now, I think it's part of the culture around the nostalgia for 80s and 90s when there were fights. But a lot of people now think NBA players are soft, but so much of this has been directed by the NBA. And David Stern, following the Malice in the Palace, did such a great job of cleaning up the image. I mean, it took years. But I don't think players today are soft. And I don't think the game is less physical. I actually don't think this at all. And I wanted to get your perspective on this. Like, I watch a lot of old games on YouTube. I watched 93 Jordan versus the Suns when he averaged over 40 for that series. I watch 80s Lakers Celtics finals games. And like, I have a hard time saying the game is less physical. I'm watching Memphis try to guard Golden State last night, and Dylan Brooks off the ball, grabbing and holding Steph and pushing and shoving. There was like 17 illegal screens set last night. I think the fouls were harder. I think what was a flagrant is much different. Do you agree with that?
I agree with the second part of it, because you would commit what today is a flagrant foul penalty to. You're still playing in the game back in the 80s and 90s. I mean, they call a foul and maybe call a flagrant, but it's you're still playing, and guys commit fouls now that are tossed. So that part is different. But I do think that it's not as physical because the rules have been changed. Now, I agree with you 100%. Players aren't soft by any stretch, but they have different regulations that they can use the part of their game. Like there were games back in the 90s when the Knicks would play the Heat, or the Bulls and the Pistons. I mean, the kind of fouls in those games, you just can't even come close to now. It's like it's a different game. So I do think it was much more physical. But the softness that's ridiculous. The players, the shape they're in, and how strong they are now with all the training they do. Mm-mm.
I think the advantage that offensive players have now, with the ability, really good ones know how to initiate contact and draw fouls. James Harden, Joel Embiid. I mean, our game started late last night because they shot 16 free throws or something like that in the first quarter.
First quarter lasted almost an hour.
Yeah. And it's just it makes it harder to play good defense, and the scoring is way up now. I think some of the scoring being up too is, I think teams have figured out, let's just use our best players as many possessions as possible. A lot of guys are having career high in usage rates, where it used to be your best players would get 28 to 32% of possessions. Now they're getting high 30s possessions. They're putting their teammates in positions to score. But I just, with the space, the rules, I think it's really hard to get stops. Now, teams can do it. There's some of the greatest athletes in the world, but it's becoming harder and harder to play good defense. If you look at the defensive rating, compared even to early in my career, it's insane what is the number one defense versus what was the number one defense back then.
Now this is my 31st year. I think it's harder to play defense now in the NBA than it ever has been. Eric Spoelstra did a Heat game a couple of weeks ago, and he said, as coaches, we're all just trying to figure out how to defend. I mean, Eric Spoelstra, who's one of the great coaches the game has ever seen, He's playing all this zone, trying to do anything to try and figure it out because the spacing, the skill level, et cetera. And in recent years, all the rule changes were to benefit the offense. More fun for the fan, more enjoyable to watch. That's why I think like this year with the traveling and the palming, they got to do something to give the defense a little something back because it's hard enough that they can't bump them anymore. Now you're letting them take extra steps or, carry the ball. And I think it worked early. I think they've cut back a little bit on it, but I'd like to see that continue because to me, I love great defensive battles. They're as fun to me as watching a 135 to 134 game where guys are just, knocking down threes. So I thought that was a good addition, and they have to keep on that because they've got to give the defense something back.
We talk about him all the time on the show, but what do you make of, speaking of skill level, just of Jokic and what he's able to do on the court?
You never see anything like it. You look at him, he doesn't look like he's in shape. He doesn't look like he could outrun anybody on the court. His brilliance in terms of his skill level is number one, but the way he sees the game, his mind, I think he's one of the greatest players to ever play. And now, it took him a couple of years to develop it because he was a backup at first. But I love everything about him. His joy for his teammates' success. Only cares about one thing, and that's getting the win at the end. I think he seems to enjoy playing with a little flair as well. Like he could make the easier pass, but he doesn't all the time. He makes passes that a great young point guard would be proud of. He's the best passing big man I've ever seen, and he might be the most unique player I've ever seen for that size, with that skill, and that brilliant mind.
The old adage that TV adds 15 pounds. I think there's something to be said about that with Jokic because
he's on your open last night. You looked heavy. I thought it might have been the holidays.
I was wondering if he was going to bring it up
between Thanksgiving and Christmas. It was just he
didn't do the January gym,
right? But it could have been the TV because you don't look as heavy right now.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it. I'm the same weight as I was last night. No, but every time I see him up close in person, where I'm talking to him, he's kind of slim.
Yes,
he's kind of slim.
Doncic the same way.
Yeah,
you see Doncic on TV, and then you see him in person, and he's in great shape.
Yeah, it's just I don't know. It's just body composition. I wanted to get your perspective on this season in particular, the parity in the league, because there was that run with the Cavs and Warriors where people felt like, oh, why don't we even play the regular season? We know who's going to be in the finals. This year, it feels like there's probably 8 or 9 teams that have a legit shot to win it all. I would argue you could probably go to 10. But if you look at the ratings for those Warriors-Cavs series, they were really high. I don't think we've gotten back there. You would probably know better than me. What is better for the league? Is this what we're experiencing right now? Is this parity? Is this good for the NBA?
I think as my own fandom, I love it, not knowing who's got a chance to win. But I think in the history of ratings, and this goes with every sport, everybody loves the David and Goliath story. You want to knock off, the dynasty. Will they fall? Whether it's an individual player, whether it's this great team, who can beat this great team? Who can knock off Goliath? So I think that probably makes more casual fans tune in, but I think the rabid NBA fan loves it like this. And I don't know if I've ever seen it like this. Even the elite teams, you don't know what you're going to get from night to night. And to me, one of the biggest reasons is you don't know who's going to play from night to night. And I understand all the metrics and the medical professionals and their analysis, but load management has changed. It's hard to get a real barometer on teams all season because guys are in and out of the lineup so much. And that's why you see even now, it used to be only, I'm sure you know this, the first couple of weeks of the season, every year, there's the funky results like, what? It's because the bad teams don't know they're bad yet, and the good teams just aren't in a flow. Now we're seeing them even now here at the end of January where there's some head-scratching performances from even great teams. And a lot of it has to do because you don't know who's playing from night to night.
Orlando beating Boston 3 straight times.
Right.
By the way, I think Orlando's a good team. Like they have a talent. And this is, I think, part of the parity. I agree with you completely. The load management thing. And by the way, there are guys that are getting hurt, like legitimate injuries. Kevin Durant, legitimate injury. There is injury management as well, right? You know, guys that are coming off injuries, off-season surgeries, not wanting them to play in back-to-back. Like, I get all of that. But I think part of the parity as well is the dispersion of talent, because I think the talent pool is deeper and there's more teams with 1 or 2 really great players. And there's a lot of young talent where, again, like you said, they don't know they're bad. They still have a rational confidence.
Right.
So on any given night, Jalen Green can go for 40 and Houston wins a game. Şengün is a great player. Like, so I think the dispersion of talent plays a factor in this. I wanted to bring up something, you know, up until a few years ago, there was like, since 1980, it was like 6 teams had won an NBA championship, or 7 teams. And over the last 4 years, Raptors, Lakers, Bucks, Warriors, likely going to be a 5th straight team. But at least in the modern NBA, and you could probably go back to the 60s and with the Celtics as well. 70s were a little wonky because of expansion. But I feel like the NBA has always been built on dynasties. In any era, it's always been about 1 or 2 players that have led their teams to championships. Daryl Morey actually went on a podcast, and I'm blanking on the name of the podcast right now. I listened to it on the flight to San Francisco, and he talked about the outsized impact of the tier 1 players. It's unlike anything else in any sport. Baseball, you bat once every 9 times.
Right.
You know, he had this great analogy where it's like Tatum or Luka, for example. They're going to manipulate a possession until they get the matchup they want. And they can do that possession after possession after possession. And his analogy was, imagine Barry Bonds in his prime, getting to bat 8 or 9 straight times.
Right.
And being able to choose which pitcher throws him the ball.
That's actually a great analogy. I mean, he's so smart on stuff like that. But it's true. And you know, the Lakers Celtics matchups in the 80s saved the league. Michael Jordan then comes in and the Bulls, you know, dominate. It's what I went back to before, that everybody loves the Goliath, and having those great teams, you know, you feel like, as a fan, you feel like you're watching history. If you're watching Tiger Woods, you're watching history. You're one of the greatest of all time. That's, as sports fans, we root for our team and we're passionate about that. But the other thing, we always hope, anytime you sit in front of your television, whatever sport you're watching, you want to watch something that's never happened, or watch a player you've never seen like this before. And that's part of the appeal of sports. So
isn't this an argument in a weird way for the super team? Just for the idea of the super team? Because, like, think about those Miami teams. It hasn't worked out as well in Brooklyn, but even a team like this is a team, whether you love them or you hate them, and a lot of people, probably more people hate them than love them, they will tune in a way that they may not for Memphis, or for a team that's, you know, homegrown, where they don't really know very many players on the team or anything like that.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I do think that gets better ratings, and it's better for the teams in terms of bringing in more fans and bringing in those casual fans. But you know, you can't have that. But it's also a challenge for every team. Okay, just be better. You know, you've got to figure out, draft better, sign better free agents, have better player development. Just be better, and then you can win too. And, you know, there's a reason. It's clearly talent number one, but organizations who know what they're doing, that's why they're up there. And that's the challenge for all of them. And you hope that they can meet the challenge, and you can have a lot of great teams, and every fan base feels like they have a shot. That's also part of the growth of the game. And that, you know, if a team's bad for 10 years in a row, fans aren't going to show up. The team's financially in trouble. So you want that parity. But it is, I agree with you, there's something about having that great elite team that everybody wants to knock off that adds a little element to the drama.
Without going on a full rant here, your point about drafting well, I think, is very important, because NBA fans, NBA Twitter, headlines, oftentimes it's about trades or potential trades, free agent transactions in the summer. That has become a whole event. And to me, the draft gets overlooked in terms of the excitement. even when you look at some of the big threes that have been successful in recent NBA history, Paul Pierce was drafted by the Celtics. Dwayne Wade was drafted by the Heat. Golden State, all three of those guys are drafted there. Memphis has built a really competitive team that I think has a chance to win a championship through the draft. And I don't think enough is made about the draft, partly because it's the unknown. If you're signing a tier 1 free agent or you're trading for a player at the deadline, you know what you're getting. But the draft is as important, maybe more important, I think, than anything else in terms of building a team.
And it's harder now to draft than it was in past because you don't have the bigger sample size. You know, it's just to get a guy off 1 year in college, and often they don't even play a full season, and you're going to throw all the money at him. He's the one that's going to change the franchise off a small little sample size. It's really hard. There's very few guys now who go the distance. Watching your game last night, Desmond Bane was one of my. I love the way he plays. He played 4 years of college. He was ready to play when he came in the NBA. And I'm not saying that wasn't a great draft pick. It was a terrific draft pick, but they got to see him for 4 years. So many of the guys, who did I have the other night where he came out after 1 year and Darius Garland. Did he play 3 games in college?
I think it was 5.
Okay, 5 games in college. Notice how he corrects me right away.
Maybe it was 6. I could be wrong.
No, but like a guy like that, how do you? Yes, you can see. All right, he's great. He's a terrific college player, but you don't know how it translates. How many great college players? It's not the same game, and it's harder now to do it. But the good ones get it done. I mean, the league is littered with stars who were 2nd-round picks or late. Giannis, a perfect example. 15th, 14 people ahead, and didn't realize that this guy is going to be one of the greatest players to ever step on a basketball court. It's
Jokic was a 2nd-round pick,
right? I mean, really. I mean, it's unbelievable how many of that, and it's a crapshoot, and it's hard to do. It's harder to do than it's ever been.
I think that's a valid point. Looking for an easy way to eat well and save money? Cut back on expensive takeout and delivery and get started with HelloFresh. You'll love how fast, easy, and affordable it is to whip up restaurant-quality meals right in your own kitchen. You can customize select meals by swapping proteins or sides, or even adding protein to a veggie dish. And now you can even upgrade for organic chicken or organic ground beef.
Fast and fresh recipes. HelloFresh's latest line of meals featuring robust flavors and filling portions are ready in less than 15 minutes. Enjoy taste and quality done quick with recipes like falafel power bowls, seared steak and potatoes with béarnaise sauce, or Southwest pork and bean burritos.
Wow. Tommy, I have a lot going on between the podcast, ESPN, coaching Knox. HelloFresh helps me save time. The recipes are easy to follow. I can have a restaurant quality meal in just 30 minutes. Go to HelloFresh.com/JJ65 and use code JJ65 for 65% off plus free shipping. That's 65% off plus free shipping when you use the code JJ65. That's HelloFresh.com/JJ65. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. You talked about rooting for your team, rooting for our team as sort of a dual role play-by-play guy where you're calling Knicks games and you're calling national games. I watch League Pass all the time. There's generally a homerism to League Pass broadcast. I've talked to, during my career, I would talk to some of the broadcast guys and they're like, yeah, we got to be very positive. We got to talk about the team in a certain way. When you're doing national games for the Knicks, how do you sort of balance that?
I don't think I change the way I talk about the team differently. I think I change how much I talk about the team. So, for example, if I'm doing a Knicks-Mavericks game on MSG Network, most of the people watching are Knicks fans. So if Dallas goes up by 20, I'm not necessarily bringing up why Dallas is up by 20. The comment I'll ask my analyst or talk about is why the Knicks are down by 20. So I think it's more of an emphasis. Now, I try and maintain objectivity because I think that's what New York fans like. But at the same time, it's clear by my broadcast that I want the Knicks to win. And I get much more excited when they hit a big bucket at the end. But if a opposing player makes a great shot or winning basket, to me, there has to be intensity on that call as well. But it's clear that I want them to win. But it's more of the volume of how much you talk about the team. When it's a national broadcast, then you have to be especially make aware of that the other team's getting as much notice and discussed about as the Knicks. It's more 50-50 as opposed to a local broadcast. It's kind of more 75-25. But I remember when I first started, and I tell Mark Jackson this, the Knicks and the Pacers had some great playoffs. And Mark, who I knew as a Knick, I covered him when he was at St. John's. When he was a Indiana Pacer, I hated him. He was so obnoxious. Hated him. And so the Knicks and Pacers had all these things. And I remember one time Reggie Miller hit a big shot, a surprise, against the Knicks to win a playoff game. And I'm hooting and I'm big, strong call. Miller does it again. I win. Lay out. Turn. I'm like, I was so mad, so mad that he hit the shot, but I couldn't let it show on the air. And a couple of times that was hard when I first started, but then you realize you've got an audience to serve and you have to stay focused and professional.
When Reggie was going back and forth with Spike, and I guess this is probably just a question about any time something, take the malice out of it, where there's a thing with like a fan on the sidelines, are you able to pay attention to that happening? Or are you just working and like, are you aware that that's going on?
Oh, sure. No, you watch that because that's part of the story. And depending on the player, some players like Reggie, he embraced that and he thrived on that. Trae Young's like that. He seems to thrive on being the villain. So that when that becomes part of the story, absolutely, especially at the Garden, because there's always celebrities there and they're talking. But what Spike did back then probably wouldn't be allowed now. Although it happened in L.A. last week, and he was able to stay seated on his courtside seat, Mr. Sharp. But that's the league is a little more influenced by that and making sure that
double
stuff doesn't
standard,
happen.
the double standard. Actually, Ryan and I were talking about this last night, Tommy, because I brought up with him calling games from home during the bubble and how weird that was. And the point he made was when you're on the court, and I didn't know this until I started calling games, but when you're on the court, you actually see everything. I don't watch the monitor unless they tell me it's a replay and I got to talk about the replay. I'm watching the bench. I'm watching Kerr's interaction with Steph Curry. I'm watching Tibbs and Julius Randle interact. I'm watching Draymond talking shit to a fan. Like you pick up so much stuff being courtside, and then you can hit your talk back button and tell the producer, get a camera on so-and-so ASAP.
Right. I do the same thing, but as a play-by-play guy, you have to keep looking back because you never know what they're going to put on. And that's all the part of the teamwork between producer and director. The director's trying to show what you're talking about. But sometimes things happen. I remember the first time I was doing Knicks radio, and Marv was the TV voice, and it was my first fill-in for Marv on TV. I was so nervous. And I'm just watching the court like I do on radio. I hadn't looked at the monitor, and they're playing the Rockets, and I'm talking about Hakeem Olajuwon, and not only what a great player he is, but what a great ambassador he is for the league. And I'm going about as Hakeem the human being as I'm talking. I'm looking down at my notes, and I'm unaware that Hakeem now is on camera, MFing a referee. The timing could not have been worse. And I just look like a fool. What a wonderful person this is, as he's like, going at the referee. The next day there was, and I'll remember to this day, there was an article in one of the papers that said that Marv's replacement was awful. And boy, did the MSG network really miss the great Marv Albert, which of course they always did. But it was crushing. And I remember Mike McCarthy, who was the guy that hired me at MSG, who was so influential on me. I remember saying, don't worry about it. He says, you just got to make sure to scan at the monitor once in a while. He called the game off there. But like when I've done now, when the ball, when a whistle sounds, that's when you look down. And just to see where the director's going and stuff like that. But you have to balance at that. Otherwise, you can get embarrassed.
You guys, meaning the play-by-play guys, also have to deal with the stats guy next to you who's constantly handing you notes, pointing at the box score to give you information. On top of that, you've got that person next to me feeding you ad reads.
Sage manager.
There's a lot going on your plate. So I don't envy that at all.
Well, it's again, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You just, over repetition, you get a kind of a feel for it. And if you have good people there and everybody knows how to do it. Dave Fried has been my stat guy for almost my entire career. And I'm a better broadcaster when he's next to me, because not only does he give good numbers, but he understands the game. He's a high school referee, so he's into the rules, and he's really, really helpful. But he knows when to hand the stuff and not distract you, and when to, not to. For example, you could work with stat people and they'll hand you a note, a 6-0 run. Well, there are 36-0 runs in every NBA game. It doesn't make any sense. 2 3-pointers is a 6-0 run. But he knows what's a good stat. So for me, and stats are obviously huge in the NBA, but to me, it's always quality over quantity.
Yeah. By the way, we should note, Tommy, Mike, you've fought through a lot in your career. The early criticisms of your broadcast.
The New York newspaper columnist.
Well, I grew up with 3 older brothers who verbally and physically abused me, so I was able to deal with some adversity as I grew up.
Speaking of MSG, do you have any those Bulls Knicks series in the 90s? Do you have any favorite memories?
Every game was so electric when Jordan was at the Garden. The John Starks dunk was an amazing game. The Charles Smith trying to put it in, that was the year they thought you're going to beat them and coming up short. That was the most deflated I think I've ever seen the Garden. One of my favorites, I remember sitting there courtside, and Michael Jordan had the ball knocked out of bounds, and he thought he was fouled. And he goes up to the ref, and I think it was Eddie F. Rush. And I've heard foul language in my life. It's unbelievable how ugly it was. And Rush is just looking at him. No, Michael didn't get fouled, and walked away. The next possession, Chris Childs gets called for a reach and foul. It looked like he got it clean. And he looks at the official and he says, that was bullshit. Technical foul. And I'm thinking, that's just not right. It's just not right. So, as a Knick announcer growing up, the Jordan thing was maddening to have somebody that special. And I always remember Jordan, even if it was a regular season game in March where they already had the top seed locked up, how tenacious he was in every single play. That's the thing that stood out with him, is that every single play he's playing like this is going to decide who wins the championship. Now, it changed as he got older, obviously, because he had so much responsibility. But early in his career, man, he was such a joy. The whole career, he was a joy to watch. But that tenacity on every single play is what struck me in those games.
It's really interesting because Stephen A. and Greeny and I got into a pretty heated argument on Get Up last year during the playoffs.
When you say on Get Up, you don't have to say heated argument. It's considered that's.
But they try.
No, First Take is actually more.
First Take is the heated argument, yeah. Right. But we still get some viral moments on Get Up. But their whole argument was that star players back then, didn't complain to the referees, and I'm like, guys, guys, are you serious? Right. Complaining to the referees is universal across time. That's high school. I'm watching my 8-year-old Knox, with the hand gesture. He's not cursing. He's not right. The referee, but the hand gestures, the point. It's like part of the game.
Right. And the stuff they said was ugly, but back then the officials could come back with something just as ugly. Some of the exchanges I remember hearing back in the day, Jake O'Donnell, who was one of the great referees of all time, he would come back with something even worse. Joey Crawford would be able to do it back in the day too, but it's changed now where the officials, they can. And if they do, it becomes big news.
Yeah. I think Tony Brothers called Spencer Dinwiddie a bitch ass or something like that.
Right. And it's, when you're being called that, it's hard as a human being not to respond. And they, for the most part, they do an amazing job of not responding to some of the stuff that's said to them.
You and I have a couple shared interests, mainly golf and wine. So quickly, your dream golf foursome and your dream wine dinner.
Wow.
Who's a part of that?
Well, that's hard. That's really hard. Well, in my golf foursome, it'd be my dad because he didn't take up the game till late, and it was like our best times together. He passed in 2011, so he would be in that, and like he always played at the public courses in the area, where he knew that if he hit it to the left side, he had a chance of hitting those section of rocks to get an extra 100 yards. So he knew the course so well. So when I was able to, fortunate to join a private club, it was like the greatest thing for him, and it was just our best times together as I got older. So he's out there, but the other ones, it's hard to tell. One of the most fun I've had playing golf, the most I ever laughed during a golf round was with Bill Raftery and PJ Carlesimo. I mean, those two going at each other on every single shot. You couldn't concentrate on because you were laughing so hard. That was as fun a round as I've ever had. And the other one I've had to play, I got a chance to play with Larry David a few times. And what he is on that show, that's what he is on the golf course, with the exception that he's serious. Like, he loves the game, and like it means something to him. He's really serious. So that's probably in there.
What about a wine dinner? Have you drank wine with Pop, by the way? Because
yes.
Pop's, I have not, and Pop's on the list for me. Like, I would love to share a bottle with. I actually sent him a bottle, and I'm hoping that maybe he opens it with me someday.
Yeah, no, he's in fact, I didn't start drinking wine until about 7 years ago. Never drank wine my whole life. Went to Italy with my family, and my wife and kids were drinking wine, so I figured I had to try, and I became addicted. And I went to Pop when I got back from Italy and asked him, give me a starter's kit. How do I learn? And he gave me some great thoughts that has helped me. So we talk about it once in a while. As for like 3 wine guests, somebody asked me 3 dinner guests recently. You're going to think this is completely off the charts, but I'm really into music. Like, music means everything to me. I listen to music every day. It's like it's in my soul. It part of my moods, everything. And I've become in love with movie soundtracks, original scores. So I met John Williams recently, and I think I was more nervous meeting him than anybody I've ever met in my life, including Michael Jordan, Larry Bird. So I might go with, I would love to have a dinner with John Williams. Another prolific guy is Hans Zimmer. Thomas.
Hans Zimmer does Christopher Nolan movies,
right?
So I like that. Right. I like that pick.
And Thomas Newman is another one. Jerry Goldsmith is the guy that did both Rudy and Hoosiers. Try and watch those movies without the soundtrack.
Yeah, the Rudy score is amazing.
They're not even, the movies aren't as good.
Yeah.
Movie soundtracks enhance movies, so that might be my. I know that's kind of out of left field.
That would be a fun dinner.
John Williams, by the way, goes out every afternoon by himself and plays
like 5 holes.
By
himself
at Bel Air. Yeah,
right.
It's amazing.
And I've seen him, and
I've seen him on the course too.
How is he 90 now?
I don't know if he's 90. He was going to retire, but he just said he announced his retirement, and now he's doing more. He just got nominated for another Academy Award for the Fabelmans.
Yes, 75 or some crazy number of Academy Awards.
Yeah, like how many times he's been nominated. But he was on the other fairway, and I was too scared to go over and say hello. But I was like a little kid wanting to go say hello.
Before we wrap, I had 3 specific bangs I wanted to bring up, just to sort of get your sort of perspective on Luka in the bubble against the Clippers, the Kobe shot against the Suns, and then the Steph game winner against OKC, the one from 40 feet or whatever it is. I was curious how many double bangs you've done.
I think 3. Steph, that one was the first one. That was an out-of-body experience. I can't explain that. It just happened because that was the year everything was falling into place for them. It was that magical run. He was as good as anybody's ever played long distance, and that was a game. He left the game with a bad ankle. They were down 12. They had this amazing winning streak, and it was all over. And then he comes back and does that at the end. So I lost it on that. That was so memorable because of all the circumstances surrounding the game. The Kobe one was just because of who he was. Another one of those players that you felt it was an honor to call every single game they did, and for it to come down to one game, for one shot. Of course, he's going to hit that. And that was one where I just said bang, and that's it. Stopped because the crowd just exploded. And then the Doncic one, again, the way the game gone, and he just hit one good shot after another and hit another one. And I also think because it was the bubble and we were starved for excitement with no crowd. That was part of that. So I try and save them for big moments. The third one was because wasn't a double bang with Kobe. There was a Eric Gordon one I called, and I don't know how that came about. I don't know the answer to that. But I got very excited.
What an honor for him.
We're going to end on that note. Mike, we greatly appreciate the time, man. This has been fun.
Oh, please. It's the stuff you guys do. I've told you many times I'm such a huge fan. The way you guys, the different questions you ask, it's an honor for me to be on. I hope one wasn't as boring as I feel I was.
That was great. We loved it. Thank you.